Yo, legends! Before we jump into today's video, I got a quick challenge for the real Lion King fans out there. In The Lion King, Scar always felt threatened by someone. So here's the question. Who did Scar see as the biggest threat to his rule in the Pride Lands? Think you know it? Type your answer in the comments right now. I'll shout out the right answer in the next video, so don't miss out. Alright, let's get into it. Imagine if Mufasa had actually survived in The Lion King. Can you picture how different the whole story would have been? Just think about it for a second. It would have changed everything. First off, Simba, his life would have been completely different if his father was still alive. Instead of running away and living in exile, Simba would have stayed in the Pride Lands, learning directly from Mufasa how to lead and rule with wisdom and strength. He would have been the next great king, experienced, fair, and fully prepared to handle the enormous responsibility of the kingdom. And that brings us to the big question. If Mufasa had survived, would Simba still want revenge on Scar? Absolutely. After what Scar did, trying to kill his own brother, Simba would have definitely wanted to settle the score, even if it meant facing a serious internal conflict. But let's be real. If Simba hadn't run away, he never would have met Timon and Pumbaa. No jungle life, no Hakuna Matata. And let's be honest, Timon and Pumbaa were a huge part of Simba's transformation, from a lost cub to a wise leader. If Mufasa had lived, that whole chapter of Simba's growth wouldn't have happened. He'd be too busy learning about ruling a kingdom under his father's watchful eye. With more structure, more training, more guidance, he'd be prepared sooner, sure. But without those life lessons he got during exile, would he be the same leader? Still, having Mufasa around would have brought pressure. Big pressure. Being raised under such a wise and powerful king, Simba would have always felt that weight. And Mufasa? He wouldn't just hand over power on day one. He'd ease Simba into it. Some small responsibilities, some leadership training. But he'd keep a close eye, making sure Simba was ready before giving him the throne. Now, let's talk about what actually happened in the movie. Scar kills Mufasa, throws him into the stampede, and takes over the Pride Lands. But imagine if Mufasa had survived. He could have warned Simba about Scar's betrayal, exposed the truth. That alone might have sparked an all-out war between Scar, the hyenas, and Mufasa's loyal pride. If Mufasa did survive the fall, he could have returned to challenge Scar directly, especially once Scar found out his brother was alive. That would have led to a huge battle between them. If Mufasa won, he could have reclaimed the throne and restored peace to the Pride Lands. Here's a wild scenario. What if Scar spared Simba instead of trying to kill him? He might have raised him to be a successor in his own dark image with the help of the hyenas. But let's be honest. Eventually, Scar would have seen Simba as a threat and gotten rid of him anyway. And the most intense twist, if Mufasa somehow survived, even after major injuries, he might still rise up and fight Scar, wounded but determined. He could defeat Scar and bring back balance. But honestly, with those injuries, the odds would be stacked against him. If Mufasa had lived, Scar's rule would have been constantly threatened. Scar was never going to give up the throne willingly, and if Mufasa showed up alive, Scar would have gone full war mode. But that war would have torn the Pride Lands apart even more than before. Now, let's focus on Scar for a second. If Mufasa was still alive, Scar probably wouldn't have dared to rebel. He always stayed in the shadows, convinced he deserved the throne more. But with Mufasa in charge, Scar would have seemed weak, especially if everyone knew he couldn't take on Mufasa directly. That might have pushed Scar to flee the Pride Lands entirely, hiding out somewhere far from the king's reach. And what about Nala? In the original story, she finds Simba in exile and helps bring him back. But if Simba never left in the first place, her role would have been totally different. He wouldn't have felt that same loneliness or desperation. So Nala's impact on the story, it would have been way smaller. And her life would have taken a different path too. Now, flip the story again. If Mufasa stayed alive, the dynamic between Simba and Kiara from The Lion King 2 would have shifted completely. Simba would have been way more prepared to rule. He'd deal with any threat, Scar or anyone else, head on. But without Mufasa, Simba had to go on that journey of self-discovery. He had to learn how to lead on his own. With Mufasa around, that personal growth arc, gone. Everything would have been taught, not lived. And then there's Zira. If Mufasa was still alive, oh boy, things would have exploded. Zira, the villain from The Lion King 2, saw Scar as the rightful king. With Mufasa alive, she would have targeted him, triggering an epic conflict between the old generation, Mufasa, and the new generation, Zira and her cubs. That clash could have been the most explosive part of the whole saga. Even the questions change if Mufasa survived. Would a generational war have broken out? Would Simba have fought Scar in a different kind of power struggle? The whole story would have been way more complex, deeper, a totally different Lion King. And that brings us to the end of today's video. This topic was really interesting when we thought about how everything in The Lion King would have changed if Mufasa had lived. Just think about the characters and the lessons we've learned from them, and how their journey would have been different if the circumstances were different. We all know that The Lion King isn't just a cartoon, it's a lesson in life about responsibility, challenges, and leadership. Between Scar's control, Simba's determination, and Mufasa's wisdom, the story is full of moments that teach us deep lessons about life. But maybe if Mufasa had lived, you would have learned some different lessons than what you learned from Simba alone in his absence. Also, don't forget that there was a question at the start of the video. If you knew the answer, write it in the comments, because if you answer correctly, I'll feature your name in the next video. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. And do you think that if Mufasa had lived, it would have really changed the course of the story? If you like this idea and the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything new. I'll see you in the next video, and always be ready for new discoveries and challenges, because life is like the Lion King, full of surprises.